Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another amazing guest for the Women's Summit, all about customers. Today we have Arlene Battishill. She's one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, and she has so many incredible things going on right now. I can't wait for her to share with us what's going on and what she's doing new in her life to attract more customers through business. So Arlene, welcome. And if you could tell us a little bit about your background, because it is so amazing and so incredible, and I'm sure a lot of women can relate to it. And then tell us what you've been doing in the last couple of years, because I've been following it and I find it exciting. So I think that they will too.
Oh, beautiful. Well, Sharon, thank you so much for inviting me to be here with you today. You know what? My story goes back about 10 years because 10 years ago, I was working in a big corporate job, six-figure paycheck, big life, big money, everything big in my life at the time. And I lost my job as part of the downturn in the economy at the end of 2008. And I worked in an industry where there was no way I was going to go back into a job at that level with that kind of money. And so I basically, ended my employment. Well, it was ended for me, like for many people. I didn't lose my job. They took it. I know right where my job is, right?
Well, I can relate.
Yeah. So when I lost my job at the end of 2008, and there was no indication that I was going to be able to return to that employer or anything like it because of the nature of the job that I was doing, I basically had to reinvent myself. And I left the company and I decided I was going to start a new company. And it was at the height of the recession. And that's generally not the best thing to do, is dump a lot of money into a brand new venture where you have no experience and no expertise and no nothing. So of course, that's what I do. I just jump into things I know nothing about. And that's what I did. But it turned out really well because, I went 7 years without a paycheck. So that part of it didn't turn out so well. But I created a company called Go-Go Gear, and we design and manufacture fashionable protective clothing for motorcycle and scooter riders. And I went and did that because I am a motorcycle rider myself. And up until the point at which I created the company Go-Go Gear, I was not wearing any protective clothing. I, of course, wore a helmet because California has a helmet law, but I wasn't wearing anything else protective because everything available for women is so freaking ugly that there was just no way that I could go into work. It was bad enough that I had helmet hair. I couldn't go in. I was riding to work on my motorcycle with a business suit on. So there was just no way that I could come walking in with that big, ugly football player style gear that is always way too big and way too ugly for women. And so I decided, well, if I wasn't going to get another job in my industry, I'm just going to go and figure out how to do this. And so I pretty much engineered a type of protective clothing that had never been done before and had never been seen before. And when we just came to market, we had a lot of stores carrying our product. We had a really unbelievable first year of coming to market, which was actually the beginning of 2010. And we had a great 2010. We still weren't taking any money because I had dumped pretty much my entire life savings into the business, which obviously wasn't a smart thing to do, given that the next 7 years I wasn't going to get a paycheck. But it was, I mean, the response to what I had invented was unbelievable, and everybody was excited about it. We went and did a couple of trade shows in Europe, and we were written up all over the European press as, where did these people come from? They aren't even in the industry, and they invent this unbelievable stuff. And in 2011, we are just going full guns. We're in full production. We've got all kinds of inventory coming in, and the entire bottom fell out of that industry. And in the span of 1 year, there were 18,000 retail stores that carried products like ours and sold motorcycles and scooters. And by the end of 2011, there were only 10,000 of them left. And so we lost 8,000. We all lost almost 50% of all of the retailers in the power sports industry. And the remaining 10,000 stores absorbed all of the existing inventory of bikes and clothing and gloves and every accessory, known to man and woman in the riding world. and they bought all that stuff up for pennies on a dollar. And they were so overloaded with that excess inventory that we lost all of our dealers that year. Or all of our retail stores. And that in 2010 actually was the moment that it became very clear to us that the whole industry was going down. And that's when we hit it hard on the internet. And the saving grace for us was that when I first started the business at the end of 2008, I knew that, there was no way we were ever going to get people to know that we were out there. And so we had to use social media. And at that time in 2008, in 2007, there were only 20 million people on Facebook. And by 2008, maybe 50 million. But Facebook didn't even have an ad platform at the time. Mark Zuckerberg was anti-advertising, and that was part of the big battle between him and his co-founder, because the co-founder was all about, we've got to monetize this. And Mark Zuckerberg was, no, this is just about community. And fast forward 10 years and we see what he's doing. But there was no ad platform. There was just no way to get the word out. And before we came to market with the first product, before we even had a website, before we showed even one single photo of what we were working on, I was all over Twitter and Facebook, just chattering like crazy. And we had a lot of followers, and they were really excited. They were really excited that something new and special and different and exciting was coming. And I did that every single day, nonstop. It was literally 24/7, because at that point I was traveling to China for manufacturing. So I was in a completely different time zone. So I was just all over the internet, wherever I was, all day and night. And the day that the website went live, and this was the first moment that everyone saw the first products that were coming to market, I was on a plane. And when the website went live, I got off the plane and my phone blew up. I had emails, I had texts, I had messages on Facebook. No one could believe what they were seeing. And we were off to the races. And so we had an e-commerce store, and we just went straight to the internet. And we especially had to do that by 2011, when the whole market collapsed for us. And so for 6 years at that point, it was actually 7 years, because it was when we finally hit the end of 2016, we had finally created $1 million business. And that was just slogging through it every day, every month, every year for 7 years, where we did not get paid. And what I had to do during that time is I was hustling like crazy, trying to find money wherever I could put it together. And, when you're working full time on a startup business and you're just gutting it out every single day and pushing through your frustration and upset around you're not making any money, and why am I doing this, and this is pointless, and all the ways that I wasn't doubting myself. I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew I had the right product. It was just the wrong time because of the economy. And I was really frustrated because there was nothing I could do about it. I just had to sit and wait and keep doing what I was doing. But that meant I had no money coming in from the business. And so as part of being in the digital side of marketing as early as 2008, I developed a skill set before there were all these tools available out there to go out and sell my product. And I've been in sales my whole life in different capacities. And so I know how to sell, and I don't need tools to be able to sell. I know exactly what makes consumers tick. And because I had been so successful, marketing the business using Facebook and Twitter at that time, which nobody was doing. I was written up in the Huffington Post, and NPR came calling, and all these other media outlets came calling, and bloggers writing stories about what I had done. This was in the infancy of digital marketing. The phrase digital marketing didn't even exist then. Nobody even knew what that was. And it took years before it became part of our language, where businesses just have digital marketing people. And so as a result of the years I spent building up that business using nothing but social media and having no benefit of an ad platform, I started getting people calling me, asking me if I could do for them what I had done for my own company. And so that led to I mean, that was the reinvention. It wasn't the creation of this business where I'm designing and manufacturing motorcycle clothing. It was the whole digital marketing piece, because it didn't exist at the time that I lost my job, and it came into being at that moment in time, and I completely capitalized on it. And one of the things that happened at the point that Facebook created its ad platform is because I had a long history in understanding what it takes to get people to buy, why people buy, what's going on for them that motivates them to buy things. By the time Facebook created its ad platform and the ability to target people on Facebook based on specific criterion, it was like a gold mine for me, because now people were coming out of the woodwork asking me if I could do Facebook advertising for them, because a lot of people can do Facebook ads. They can create the pretty pictures and come up with a nice little tagline and write a nice ad. But most people do not understand what it is that makes people tick around buying things. And that was what I was expert at. I mean, I can write great copy and come up with great ads and everything, but my real superpower, if you will, is the ad targeting, because I understand how you put a profile together that would signal to you this person is likely to want to buy what you have to offer. And there are all kinds of ways that you look at people and their behavior that signal to you what they're likely to buy, because they all buy based on emotion. And 90% of our purchasing decisions are based on emotion. And then the remaining 10% is just the logic we use to justify that we want to go out and buy something. And so when you look at how people behave, and you see what they've been buying in the past, you can draw a lot of conclusions about what they are likely to buy in the future, because the things that people buy signal to you their emotional state. And so it's not really very hard for me to understand who's likely to buy what. And so that became my calling card. And so I was doing that the whole time that I was running my clothing business. And a funny thing happened earlier this year where I thought, as I came into 2018, that I was going to be, really going full guns on my Facebook advertising business. I had created online courses. There was no shortage of business for me to have. And I became a ClickFunnels certified partner, which meant I knew a little bit more than everybody else about creating sales funnels. But I knew that, all of this stuff, the way I had reinvented myself, even, the point of having this startup business with the motorcycle clothing, quite honestly, I never set out to be an entrepreneur. That was not where I thought I was going in life. I never even thought about it until the moment that I lost my job, and I didn't have any choice. And I can remember when I lost my job and that big paycheck, and just how gutted you are when you lose everything, because I actually did lose everything over a period of time to get to one point in time where I literally had no money in the bank. And what do? You just start hustling like crazy. And I remember the very first freelancing job that I got, I was writing content. I wrote 5 blog posts. They were 500 words each, and I did it for $100. And the amount of money that I was making when I lost my job, it was really brutal to get to a moment where you're doing all of this work. And I also have a PhD. And I was a professor at one point. And, you get to a moment where everything is gone and you have nothing to offer people except your brains. And what you get paid for it is $100. When, I wouldn't think twice in the past about spending $100 on a bottle of wine. I wouldn't even think about it. That's just routine. That was just routine for me at that point, because I had the financial means to do it. And when you lose everything and you come to a moment where, you're no longer moving in circles that you used to, and now you're just faced with, a life where everyone still has their big jobs, but you don't. And then you lose everything as a result. It's just like you slip down the drain and there you are in the sewer. And I have never had a lack of confidence, Even since I was a little kid, I have never doubted my ability to do anything. And I have always been willing to hustle and do whatever I had to do. I think that I reached a point of saying, are you fucking kidding me? After all of this, I'm 48 years old, turning 50 in a couple of years, and this is where I land? Are you kidding me? What? But, and then, you know, I spend 7 years with no paycheck and I'm hustling the whole time. It's like, all right, what the hell? You know, when is this going to change? Am I going to turn 60 and still be in this situation? And so all of this is by way of saying that it was not my intention to become an entrepreneur. It was not my intention to reinvent myself. I thought I was moving up the corporate ladder and I was going to be running a big company one day. And I was uniquely positioned at the time I lost my job to move into a role like that. I just needed a few more years in the saddle, so to speak, and I would be next in line somewhere in the industry. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there went the job and there went that hope and dream and aspiration. And I always knew through the whole time over the past 10 years that I wouldn't go back to corporate America, but that is who I am. It just actually is. You know, it doesn't define me, but it's not that I'm risk averse or not capable of being an entrepreneur, but, you know, I always saw myself as somebody who was going to move into a position where I was running a really big company. And that, you know, was not in the cards. And earlier this year, I had a chance meeting at an event that I attended where I met a guy, and I had this idea where I was going to run a virtual summit for men. And the idea was to really talk about the kind of things that go on for men, especially as it pertains to trauma. And I know there's like no link between these things, but, you know, we all have our own trauma and we all deal with our own trauma at whatever point it becomes apparent to us. And then we start dealing with things. And also the whole Me Too movement kicked into high gear. Mm-hmm. And I was really interested in looking at how guys deal with their trauma. And it was just sort of in its infancy. And I met this guy who had been through a horrible experience. And he wrote a book called 369 Days, the Worst Year of My Life, or something like that. And he had had a very similar experience as I, where he lost his job. He had lost his house. Everything was gone. And he was an executive. And so we had a lot in common, but we started talking and I said, you know, I'd like to invite you to be part of this virtual summit that I'm thinking about doing. He says, yes, I'd love to. And within a couple of weeks, he and I met, and we happened to be in the same place at the same time. And I started sharing with him this theory that I had about what happens with employees. And it started with the idea that everyone comes into a new job with all of their hopes and dreams and aspirations, and that this job is actually going to solve many of the problems that they have in their life, one of which is going to be the financial piece. But it also is about status. It is about how we see ourselves, how we define ourselves through our work and so forth. And I had this theory that what happens is we come into these jobs, and as a result of the interactions that we have with the people who have power over us, meaning the managers, the people who run the companies, the people who have power over us behave toward us in ways that are not unlike the people who behaved in those same ways toward us when we were children. And that when you think about coming into the workplace as an adult and you're interacting with people in ways that trigger you, either memories or body memories or whatever, you're going to behave like the child you were in response to that person who has power over you. And the more of these interactions that you have over time, the more likely it is you are going to feel powerless and alienated, and you're going to start hating your job, and you're going to start hating the people you work for, and you just start decompensating. And I had this idea that at some point, if you have so many stressors in your life that are outside of your workplace, of the financial, fighting with your spouse, the kids, you know, traffic, all these things that all of us deal with, and that's what we bring into the workplace with us every day. We're already primed and ready to be triggered by things. And then you stick the people with power in there, and they are behaving in ways that trigger us. What do you think happens when people get triggered? Well, for most people who can self-regulate for the most part, they do okay. They manage, they go home, they complain to their spouse, they go to their employee assistance program, they go talk to a therapist, and they sort of muddle along, but they're still, they're just no longer that person who saw this job as meeting all of their hopes and dreams and aspirations. They're now in a place where they're disgruntled, they're unhappy, they're starting to talk about their boss, they're starting to, share their displeasure with everyone. But there are those people that can be triggered to such an extent that they will create significant harm to the company. And we are seeing it over and over and over again. And everybody's talking about Me Too and sexual harassment and violence in the workplace. But I had this idea that, yes, that's all stuff that's going on. And a lot of it is symptomatic of other things, but it's all about this thing about people who have power over other people, and the people who feel powerless and alienated. What is their response to that? And there will be cases where people will respond in a way that nobody knows this is what they're doing. They become very aggressive. They start planning, and they are making the move to bring the company down, or to bring down their manager, or to bring down the executives. And they do it in a lot of different ways. And the reason that this is so dangerous for organizations is because of the internet. Because all you have to do is drop one line out on the internet and it goes viral, and you can actually shut a company down. And so when I put these pieces together, where somebody comes into the workplace with all these hopes and dreams and aspirations, and over time, those feelings decline to a point of understanding how powerless you are in the workplace, especially financially, they control everything. And the sense of alienation that you feel that results from interactions with your managers that are often not very positive or pleasant, that you're just kind of left drifting, out in the open sea. And if you add in all of these external stressors, and you've got interactions with managers that are really problematic, and you're already feeling angry and resentful and carrying grudges and stuff, if you add in one final piece, which is you just feel like you can't take it anymore, or you just feel like there's just no hope, those people are predisposed to cause harm. And this is what my colleague, Michael Levitt, who has co-written this book with me called Preemptive Strike Leadership, Neutralizing the Behavioral Threats that are Infiltrating Your Organization. We basically workshop this whole idea, and it ultimately turned into this book that we just wrote that's being published the first week of January, and we expect will be in the big bookstores and so forth. And the whole idea was, if we can bring to light the fact that employees are very much like Trojan horses, and they get wheeled into your office and they open up and they unload all of your employees and all of the baggage and all of the shit that they're coming in with, and we understand that that's who we're starting with as employees. No one is exempt from this. It is the nature of human beings. It's what's happening to us every single day out in the world. All of the stresses that we bring with us and our various ways of managing them. Then if we understand that interactions between managers who have the power and employees who do not are not unlike the relationships between parents and children, or between a spouse who is the primary breadwinner and the spouse who is not. I mean, there is a dynamic that goes on here, and it doesn't have to be parent-child. It could be any other dynamic where someone has power over the other person. The person who doesn't have the power will become desperate at one point, and they become irrational. And I don't mean wildly irrational. They are not able to think clearly about the situation that they're in. And they will begin seeing that manager as whomever it is. That manager is a stand-in for somebody else in their life who has had power over them and exercised that power over them. And what happens, what follows from that is the employee decompensates, and you can't predict what they're going to do, but it's generally pretty harmful. Sometimes they'll be harmful to themselves, but more often than not, they're going to lash out. And with the advent of millennials coming into the workplace to the extent that they have, and a sense of entitlement that they have in the world, and their unwillingness to play by the rules, as was the case a decade or two ago, of employees who just, they behave differently because they were supposed to, toe the line and do what they were told. That's not how millennials behave. And fair enough, they're a different generation, but they're presenting very different challenges for employers. And if management and executives are not understanding that this dynamic exists, they're in for a whole shit show. They have no idea what's going to happen. And one of the things that I see more often than not is that they'll bring in HR consultants or organizational development consultants, and they'll do strategic plans. They'll write job descriptions. They'll, spend, 100 million years talking about core values and mission statements and all of this kind of shit. And none of it has anything to do with the employee's feeling of powerlessness and alienation. And that is at the root of what happens when an employee turns into someone who's very dangerous. And so all of that became what I'm doing now. And so my colleague Michael and I, we've created a consulting firm called Preemptive Strike Consulting. We've developed an online program where, with feedback from employees, we've created a scattergram that can basically determine the extent to which there is danger in your organization, where there are potential behavioral threats out there. And then we've developed a preemptive strike plan that you can implement in response to that. And so that's where I ended up. And what's so funny about all of this, to, sort of circle back to the beginning, is that I left corporate America watching how my employer, who let me go, made decisions about who they were letting go and who stayed. And some of the things that we write about in the book that have to do with favoritism, and how you will often find people in positions of power who were the suck-ups in the company, and they have pre-existing relationships with the executives. And those are all the people who remain when the shit hits the fan and everybody else gets let go. It's never about what you contribute or the job that you did or how well done your performance or your job was. It is always going to end up being the case where, when the shit hits the fan and the cuts have to be made, how close you are to the people in positions of power is going to determine whether you stay or you're let go. And I saw that with my own eyes, and I just thought, you know what, fuck you. That's all I could think. And then I left, and I had to reinvent myself. And here I am 10 years later, going back into corporate America, talking about the Trojan horse that employees are, and all of the stuff that they bring into the workplace, and going after management and leadership to say, this is the reality of what's going on in your place. In the workplace, I spent 30 years managing more than 1,000 people in my various jobs. I was a director of organizational development, a director of HR, and these were, years ago in companies that I worked for. I've seen it all. There's nothing that I haven't seen in the workplace, nothing that I haven't dealt with, and nothing that I haven't managed. And it all ties back to what is going on in the interaction between the managers or the executives and the employees, because it is a dead setup for shit to come down and rain on you. And if you're willing to accept that level of risk, more power to you. But we've now developed a way that organizations can address the fact that this Trojan horse is in their workplace, and we can work with managers to help them to understand that this is the reality of what's happening for your employees, and your behavior toward them is hugely problematic and creating a tremendous risk for your organization. And we can actually preempt that by understanding first, this is what's happening, and then check our own behavior to see how it is that we're triggering our own employees. And we also have to look at ourselves as managers and leaders to consider whether or not we're being triggered by something. We may have the power over everybody else, but trust me, managers and leaders, executives interact with people and they get triggered. The problem is they don't even understand that they're getting triggered because they've got the power to do whatever and they exercise that power. Employees don't have that luxury. So that's where I've ended up.
That is so fascinating. I can relate to so much of this. I spent a quarter century in corporate America before I had my last layoff. And I think I was 44. And I'm like, freaking 44 years old. Am I really going to go back and compete with all the college students and try to start over in the same or a different industry? And that's when I decided to do the same thing. I struck out and did an Italian food manufacturing business, which is nothing like your awesome protective gear, by the way.
But people have to eat.
It wasn't on me. Yeah, I was never hungry, but yeah, I think there were lots of years without a paycheck. So I can't wait to read this book because there's so much there that all of us can learn as we're building our businesses to make sure that we put systems and things in place to prevent that from happening. And frankly, I think it kind of boils down to the golden rule: treat people like you would expect to be treated. And there is no big power thing. Human beings are human beings. So, just because you make more money doesn't mean you're a better human being and you deserve to exercise power over other people. But that's
absolutely
kind of a unique perspective, I think.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you a couple of questions about handling customers over the life of your businesses and through all your levels of experience. One is, you told us already all about social media and what a huge role that and then advertising and things have had in your bringing customers to your businesses. And I know you started a podcast about a year ago, maybe? Mm-hmm. And so you do that. So I'd like, your take on, do you think people should have a podcast or a way to get their voice out there? Because there's been a lot of talk about that. And then what was my other thing? Oh, that's it. That's it for now. Okay. So social media, yes. And then tell us a little bit about podcasting, because I think that's something that people could really learn from your experience with it. Do you think it's helped you to bring customers to you? Is that how you found that Michael Lewitt, or you met him at an event?
Michael Levitt, yeah. Well, you know what? In terms of bringing customers to you, one thing I will also say is, as part of my background when I was in corporate America, I was also the director of customer service for a very large company for a long period of time. And so I have a very unique understanding of what goes on in customer service. And I was working in an industry where the price of what we sold, which were new homes, were in the $1 to $2 million range. And this is 10 years ago, and 10 to 15 years ago. And a $2 million home today in California, is like a 18 square foot house, with a tiny front yard, a postage stamp yard. That's what you get for $2 million in Los Angeles today. And 15 years ago, you were buying massive, 6,500 square foot houses on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. So it was a very different time then. But when you're selling a $2 million product, what you have to do to get that person to buy goes way beyond you just being out on the internet and, selling protective clothing or necklaces. So, yes, social media is absolutely critical, because where are you going to find your customers? They're on the internet, and most all of them are on Facebook. Now, if you're selling products from your business to another business, that is a really hard thing to do on Facebook, because it's very difficult to identify the people who are the decision makers in those companies. LinkedIn is a much better thing, and you have to use a completely different approach when you're selling B2B versus B2C. But you must be on Facebook. Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, maybe, and increasingly so. But Facebook is the place. And the reason you use Facebook for customer acquisition is because you actually have the greatest opportunity to interact with a prospect. And it happens via your Facebook posts. It happens if you create a private Facebook group. Wherever you have the ability to engage people, it increases the likelihood that you're going to be able to sell something to them. Because we all want to buy from people we know, like, and trust. And if you've created a relationship with people, even a virtual one, like what happens here and on Facebook, people have a sense that if they're going to buy something online, they at least know who they're buying from, and it increases their feeling that they can trust you, and therefore they will go ahead and buy from you. It also gives you the ability to build an email list, which is really, really important. And you'll have an email list made up of people who've bought from you in the past, your customers, but you will also have an email list of people who have expressed an interest in something you've had to offer in the past or something that you've been talking about. And your email list is like gold. I mean, I can send out an email to my list. I have about 10,000 people on my list, and it's taken me 10 years to build that list. So don't think that I just went out and got 10,000 people. I was at about 1,000 people until I was on the TV show Shark Tank. And so that brought me a whole lot of people, not necessarily buyers, but it added more people into the mix. But I can just send out an email and instantly generate sales. If I offer a discount on something, or if I say I've got something new, my customers will buy, because once you get them as a customer, they're going to want to buy something else from you because they know, like, and trust you, and they trust that whatever it is that you're bringing to market is going to be something good, and they're going to give it a look. At least, at a minimum, they're going to give it a look, and many times they will buy. And so whatever it is, if I need to generate cash quick because I've got an excess of inventory, or I've got a big shipment coming in and I have to pay the last payment for the inventory, I'll just run a special or something, and I'll generate all the money that I need to take care of that obligation. So that email list is really critical. But also the benefit of being on Facebook is that when people are sharing your posts, they're sharing it out to their own network, and you have the ability to get more people that way. I have run a lot of contests on Facebook as part of building my email list. I had one contest that I ran that I picked up an extra 1,000 email addresses as a result of that one contest. And I wasn't giving away any big thing. I just was giving away one pair of protective pants. Big freaking deal, but everybody loves to enter contests. What do they care? They'll give you their email address. And then now I have all those people on my email list that I can go out and offer something else to. So, social media is absolutely critical. And I would not have this business were it not for social media. It started through the use of social media, and it continues to this day. But one of the beautiful things is that, being around for 10 years, I was so busy on social media and YouTube, and I was creating all these, stupid videos of me trying to put on a pair of my protective pants. And I think I fell down in my closet when I was trying to put them on, or, my personality comes across in these stupid videos where, they're really self-effacing or self-deprecating, and, people get a sense of my personality. But the other thing that I've done is I've gone out to our Facebook fans and said, you know what, I'm thinking about doing something. Here's my idea. Oh my God, it's like a freaking landslide. It's an avalanche of people weighing in saying, this is what I want. This is what I need. And what happens is they become part of the development process. And when the product finally comes out, they're so excited because they've watched this whole thing take place over time and they were part of it. They're buying. They are absolutely buying. And so, there's so much power that comes from the relationship that you create with people via your presence on the internet. And one of the things that I did for a long time is that I was doing Facebook Lives. Once they first became available, I was doing Facebook Lives. I would get up every single morning and I would do a good morning video to everybody. And I wasn't even saying shit. I was just laughing all the time.
Because your laugh is so infectious. I used to watch those. I love those. I used to just laugh at your laugh because it makes my day. Every single day I'd be like, oh my God.
Yeah. So, like a lot of people were waking up to me just cackling like a chicken. But the thing is that it created such a relationship between me and all of the people out there. And at this time, I was doing this with my clothing company. I was doing it with my digital marketing stuff. I was doing it with my Facebook advertising stuff. I was doing it with sales funnels. I had people in all these different places. And so, I had multiple revenue streams at that point. And so I would just get up and I'd get on Facebook Live. And, one time I'm a rower. And so I'll go out and row in the marina where I live. And one morning I happened to have, I never take my phone in the boat with me, but for some reason I had it, and I captured a pod of dolphins swimming right next to me in my rowing boat. And there they all were. And so that was something that I was just showing. And then one time I was doing a Facebook Live from my boat because they were bringing in the fuel tank from the space shuttle on a barge into the marina. And, they were broadcasting this live nationwide on all of the major networks. And there I was with my little Facebook Live, and one of my customers in Wisconsin, she was on Facebook watching, and she says, I can't believe it. I'm watching my TV and I'm watching your Facebook Live at the same time, and I'm seeing the exact same picture.
That's awesome.
And so, when you create those kinds of relationships, they don't translate into sales immediately. They translate into people who are lifetime customers, and they will eventually buy from you if they feel that they've got a relationship with you because they want to buy something from you. They like you. I've had people say when I was doing these Facebook Lives where I would just be laughing. I would crack myself up, but I'd just be laughing. And somebody wrote me and she says, Arlene, I was watching your video and my daughter came in from the other room and said, who's that laughing?
That was me. That was probably me that wrote that. That's so funny.
So that's my take on social media. You have to be there. You have to be all over Facebook, and it takes a long time to build that audience, and you just have to stay at it. And you know what? If I went 7 years without a paycheck and I was working 24/7 to grow this business, well, you can spend some time, actually engaging people out on Facebook. It takes just a couple of minutes to do it, and you sort of leave your personality out there with them. And when you've got something to offer, they're going to buy it. Now, I've had a thought about podcasting that I got into it quite by accident because one of my friends, who's very active as a podcaster, and she's really big in content creation, her name is Kim Doyle, who you should be following.
Talking to her soon.
Oh, excellent. She's so magnificent, and she knows everything about content, and she's really brilliant about this. And she had interviewed me for something, and she said to me afterwards, she said, Arlene, you need to have a podcast. And I said, well, I don't know anything about podcasts. I don't even listen to podcasts. I go to the gym and I'm swearing the whole time because I just want to get off the freaking treadmill. So I'm not listening to anybody making me happy. I don't want to hear anything. I just want to swear at the treadmill. So I don't listen to anything. So she says, no, you have to have a podcast. And I said, okay, fine. I'll go have a podcast. So tell me what I'm supposed to do. So she sent me a list and she said, you're going to do all these things in this order. And within a day I had a podcast, and I had recorded 4 episodes, and they were all 5 minutes long, but it was enough to make there be some content there. And it went out there, and it's called What's Your Next Move? And I called it that because when I was going through that 7 years of building that business with no money coming in and things were getting really tough, all I could say to myself was, you know what, Arlene, you don't have the luxury of having a freaking pity party here. You made a choice to do this. So what's your next move? And my next move didn't have to be some big grand strategic plan. My next move could be, okay, get outside and go take a walk because you're frustrated right now. But that was my mantra, and it became my podcast because I interview people who have, gone from one point in their life where they were having a normal life and then something fairly catastrophic happened. It doesn't have to be catastrophic in the sense that somebody died or things like that. It could just be that you lost your job or something happened. You had an illness or something, and it completely derailed you. And then you were put on a trajectory over time that ultimately brought you to where you are today. And what was so interesting to me was talking to people who've been through these things, and meeting them at a point where they've got all this success today, but taking them back in time to that moment where there was no longer a normal, there was a new normal, and they had to deal with it, because that's what I had. I had my normal, and then the day I lost my job, I now had a new normal. And what do people do? How do they deal with it? What do they do to cope with those situations? And I found it really fascinating to see how people are so resilient in the face of catastrophe and what they do with it. And it's been a really popular podcast because, especially for entrepreneurs, because we all go through this stuff and the self-doubt and the questioning what we're doing and why we're doing it and can we give up and all those things that go through every entrepreneur's mind frequently. That if you could look at everything that's happening in your life and just approach it with the following: what's your next move? You will get to wherever it is that you're going to go, because it takes you out of that place where you're swirling around in all of your emotions, and engages your brain in a way that says, okay, I can do something about it. What is my next move? And you may not be able to change the situation you're in right now, but you may be able to change how you feel about it in some small way. And for me, because I'm so physically active, given the stress of what has happened in my life over the last 10 years, especially the first 5 to 7 years while I was building that business, I was out walking. I get up at 5 o'clock every single morning, and there's a big reservoir near my former house where it was 2.5 miles around. At 5 o'clock in the morning, I was out there and I was walking in the dark, and it was quiet, and I could collect my thoughts for the day. And then I'd sort of expelled a lot of whatever, dreaming I was doing and the anxiety and the stress that finds its way into the nighttime. And you wake up not feeling very settled. That it was my way of getting myself grounded, literally, by just walking. And I hate the gym. I only go there if the weather's bad, and which is in California, it's not very often. So thank God for that. Right. But, and then I started rowing about 5 years ago, and I am in the marina, and it's not like a rowboat you see in movies. It's like Olympic rowers. And it's been the best thing I've ever done in my life, because it is the most difficult physical activity on the planet. And it requires absolute focus, in the same way riding a motorcycle requires absolute focus, because on a bike, you could get injured or killed if you are not paying attention. And when you're rowing, if you're not paying 100% attention to what's happening, you'll flip the boat over and you'll be in the water. And so doing these things physically has been, my lifeline for getting through these times that have been so tough. And, when we get upset and we're in relationships that are struggling and we're obsessing, and, all the machinations in the head and the mental gymnastics and the emotional gymnastics, I have found the only way to cope with those things is to do something physical, even if it's to just go take a walk, because there is something about what happens in the brain that when you become physically active, that it actually exhausts that stuff like a car exhaust. It expels some of it. And if you can get even one moment of peace when you're going through these things, it just completely transforms how you experience what's happening. And the other thing I found too is, and this is a real problem for entrepreneurs, is we're isolated. Many of us work at home, or we may work with one other person, but generally we're at home working and we're just gutting it out and we're doing our work all day long. But the isolation actually contributes to the anxiety and the stress, because there's no outlet. And so what I found is, during that time, I was out all the time, and I wasn't going to movies. I wasn't going to, I wasn't hanging out with people. I would actually just go work at a coffee shop so that I was around people. And if I had a chance interaction with someone, it always made me feel better. I didn't need to go seek out community with people or interactions with people. I just needed to put myself or position myself in a way where conversations could happen, but I didn't have to invite them. I didn't have to engage them, but the possibility was there. And the energy I would pick up from just being out and around other people made it possible for me to come back home and start working again and feel better. And that's been a really big thing for me, because you go 7 years without a paycheck and you're gutting it out every day, and you're hustling like crazy, and you're doing a lot of that alone. It's really, really isolating. And those were the ways that I dealt with that stuff. And I know that's kind of a tangent off from the podcast, but when it comes back, when I bring this back to what you asked me, Sharon, about using the podcast for customers, no, I don't believe that is what is going to get you customers. If you're in a coaching business, maybe because you would select people to interview that might ultimately end up as your customers. But people who listen to podcasts, they listen in a very passive way. They're listening in their car. It's like they're listening to a book on tape. And it's not, there is not this sense of, the intimacy is there. Absolutely. You feel the intimacy with the person who is interviewing someone and the person who's being interviewed, or if you're just doing it as a solo podcast. But there is not that engagement with the person who's listening that creates a relationship that goes back and forth. It's a one-way conversation. And much like Twitter and Instagram, those are one-way conversations that don't really lend themselves to creating customers as a result. And, if you're some kind of coach, okay, fine, a life coach or whatever, you might be able to get clients that way. But I would tend to say that that's the podcast works best for those types of people. You might want to use a podcast if you are somebody who has written a book and people love your podcast, they might want to go buy your book. But if you're selling consumer goods, the podcast, in my opinion, is not a way that you're going to sell more of them, because you don't even know who's listening to your podcast. So it's been a great experience for me to have a podcast, because I've talked to really, really interesting people. But what I have also found is that over time, I have found that the amount of time I have to commit to the interviews, the setting up of the interviews, the recording, the editing, and then the publishing, I need to spend my time doing other things, because it is not something that you do in a short amount of time. It's a big commitment of time, and you need to be very, very clear about what you expect to get out of having a podcast. My preference is to just do a Facebook Live where I can be engaging with people, because when you're doing the Facebook Live, you can see who's showing up, and you can see the comments that are being posted, and you can talk directly back to the person who just posted something. So for me and my time and money, I'm much more inclined to go the route of, where can I get direct access to people where I can interact with them right now, which could potentially produce either a prospect or a customer. So I mean, to me, it's really, really simple. Yes, you can do Google ads. Okay, fine. But, they're very, very expensive. It's not where I spend any of my money, because there's no way to engage with people. And the engagement is what matters. And if people feel like they're going to sell a product and not be out there engaging with people, you're never going to sell that product, or you're going to sell it because people need that specific thing. But, how are you going to let them know? And you want them to come back and buy something else from you. You don't want to be just some store out in the internet that has this cool little item and they can't even remember the name of the store. And they certainly don't know who you are. So I think that, Facebook is the best way to sell anything if you're selling direct to the consumer. And because you have the ability to engage with people to the extent that you do, it's the easiest way to sell to people. So those are my thoughts about those two things.
That is such a powerful thing. And I want to just highlight it so that people don't miss it, because it's kind of an aha moment for me. Mm-hmm. I'm out there slamming all the social media, and I spend like a couple hours a day doing it, and I don't really see much results from it. And I think the key distinction that you just made for me, which makes it so much more powerful, and I'm switching my focus, is that it's got to be a platform that you can engage in and engage on. And so I agree. I love Facebook Live. It's taken me a year to get to the point where I can talk on them, and I still jumble my words and sound like an idiot sometimes, but I'm okay with that, because that's my personality. So people know what they get. But that makes so much sense with Facebook Live and Facebook. And I've actually found LinkedIn, because I do a lot of business to business work. And I wasn't doing anything on LinkedIn until this past summer. And I just started playing on it a little. And so I'll do a Facebook Live video in the morning, and it'll get like 12 views maybe on Facebook. And then I'll go to my LinkedIn, and it'll have 685 views. The exact same video. Yeah. So it's just a matter of finding your platform. But both of those allow you to engage with your audience and engage with the person you're speaking to. And that is a huge aha for me personally. And I hope that everybody else got that too, because that's so powerful. It's the advertising and just putting your face out there like the big companies can do, because they have billions of dollars. Or versus us, who have to make a name for ourselves so that we can be seen in a very, very busy world that is doing nothing but becoming exponentially more busy. So that is powerful.
And, Sharon, one thing to your point about, it took you a long time to finally put yourself out there on the Facebook Lives and so forth. And, if you mess up words and stuff like that, what people don't realize is that nobody wants perfect, because perfect is actually suspect, because you come across perfect, you're too slick, you're too polished. People do not like that. They aren't buying from somebody like that. And you being genuine and authentic and just who you are, where you mess stuff up. I mean, the extent to which, I don't know if you saw the share, maybe you did, but a few years ago, I was in the Dallas airport after having been at an event where I had an encounter with Tony Robbins on the floor of an event where he and I had this exchange that went on for about 5 minutes. And I was so high after that encounter, not because it was Tony Robbins, but I just thought it was the funniest thing, what had actually transpired between he and I, and how it actually came about. It was just totally out of nowhere. And I was laughing so hard that I spent 17 minutes waiting for my flight in the Dallas airport, where I was laughing so hard, I actually couldn't even say anything. And all of a sudden, and this was a Facebook Live, 17 minutes nonstop with me laughing. And all of these people are now watching this Facebook Live. And I probably got 1,000 people friending me as a result of that video. They had no idea what I was saying because I was laughing so hard. And then at one point I said, I'm sorry, I have to go. The plane is leaving, but I don't even think I can get on the plane because I'm laughing too hard again.
That was awesome.
And that's what I was.
You did a follow-up video and explained to us, so that was good.
Yeah. Yeah,
the
true.
Video gave us a clue, but we still were so engaged in your laughter. Like I said, your laughter just brings people in because they know that it's real and it's you.
Yeah.
And it attracts people.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, no matter what you're talking about and the way in which you're engaging people, I find that when you ask people their opinion, and this has been huge for my clothing business, I don't make a move without asking people. And they deeply appreciate the fact that you want to hear from them, you ask them, you listen, and you actually incorporate what it is that they've said to you. And so I think that that's a huge way of creating your own tribe. I hate that word because it's so overused in digital marketing, but it is creating a community of people that are all coming together around this common thing, and it happens to be you. And so if you're afraid of putting yourself out there, you're missing out on your most potent weapon in getting people as prospects and customers.
And you're missing out on the people that you can help and serve, because all of us have something to share with people. Even if we don't think we do, we all do. It's just a matter of discovering that.
Yeah, we all have, and we all have a solution to something. It doesn't even matter what it is. I mean, we all go and ask our friends and other people for advice about things because they have a different perspective on stuff. And they're not, mired in all the details of, what's going on inside of us and our world. They can look at your situation and say, you know what, if I was in that situation, this is what I would do. And you say, wow, I never thought of that. Well, no shit, Sherlock, because you're too busy with all that shit going on and swirling around in your head. But, you seek out someone else's point of view on something. It's amazing what can happen. And people will seek out what you have to offer. And as I say, everyone has a solution to something because we're all expert at something. I mean, it could be, you could be an expert at how to tie shoes. Who knows? There's somebody who needs to know how to tie a freaking shoe, especially kids, because they've got all those strap-on, the Velcro straps on their shoes and all that crap. They don't even understand what shoelaces are, let alone how to open a can with a can opener. Or use a rotary dial telephone. It's like, really?
We have one of those at the cabin, and my nephew's 18, and he's like, how do you do this phone? I've never seen anything like this, because it's one of the old-fashioned phones up there in the old shop. That's hilarious.
No clue. I've seen videos of teenagers, they're given a rotary dial phone, and they cannot make the connection between they literally can't figure out any part of it. It's really funny. And I just think, oh God, it's the end of civilization as we know it.
That is funny. Huh. All right, my dear, do you have any last words of advice for these amazing women businesses? Oh, I want to say one more thing. The actual reason that there's this women's summit is because I asked people, exactly like you were saying, ask people, and they'll tell you exactly what they want you to create. I wasn't going to do a women's summit, and all of a sudden it turned into this women's summit and at least 4 more this year. So if you just ask people, they'll give you plenty of things to do and ways that you
It's
can.
unbelievable.
Amazing.
You know, the one thing I will say about podcasts is if you're thinking about doing a podcast, one of the ways that a podcast is most powerful, I think this is the most powerful thing about a podcast, is that if you invite someone to be on your podcast, 99% of them, doesn't matter who they are, they could be the most famous people in the world. If you invite them to be on your podcast, they're likely to say yes. So if there's somebody that you want to talk to that you feel you could never otherwise get access to, if you have a podcast and you reach out to them and say, hey, I've got this podcast, it's, what's your next move? And this is what we talk about. If you have some time, I would love to talk to you. I did that with a woman who, I don't know, she lives in Fiji or something, and she's this huge influencer on LinkedIn. She probably has 1 million followers, and never in a million years did I think she would be willing to talk to me. And I sent her a message on LinkedIn, and she wrote me right back and said, yes, I'd love to. Like, okay, that's the power of a podcast. I don't know what it is about inviting people to be on your podcast, but it opens doors like nobody's business. So that would be one reason that I would advocate having a podcast. But there's a big price to pay because it's a lot of work. But if it is your way of opening doors with people all day long, I would highly recommend it.
I'll echo that. That is how I've gotten guests for this. This is how I've gotten, and having a podcast has gotten me. I think that's what's helped me on LinkedIn. That's kind of my secret weapon. Everybody I invite, I send a custom note inviting them to be on my podcast, and I pick who I want to invite. And I can't possibly interview all the people that have said yes.
Yeah, for sure.
I get like 13 people a week, and I'm like, I can't do 13 interview podcasts a week. I do a podcast every day, but it's just little segments. And then about once a week, I do an interview, but I'm like, I don't want to do more than one a week. It's too much.
Right.
Like, it's a great way to get to your Dream 100. Hint, hint, you are one of mine. I'm
on your Dream 100 list. I'm nobody.
I haven't sent you anything yet, but you're on my Dream 100 list. Yeah, I did the Dream 100. I made a list of the women I would want to be on the summit.
Wow,
and
that's cool.
I haven't even gotten to contact most of them because I've gotten so many people saying, I want to be a part of this summit. And so I'm doing a combination of people on my Dream 100 and then people that have said, raised their hand and said, I will take action. I want to be a part of this project.
Yeah,
because I think
nice.
It's a way to showcase everybody.
That's beautiful.
So my dear, thank you so much. I kept you way longer than I normally planned to. So
no, I actually think I kept you way longer, Sharon, because I was the one doing the talking the whole time. So
that's how it's supposed to be, because nobody wants to hear me talk all day long, even my kids. You have a fantastic day, and thank you so much for everything. You guys go back and listen to this again, because there are so many absolute gems of wisdom in what Arlene told us today. I don't want you to miss a thing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sharon. I really appreciate it, and I wish you best of luck and happy holidays as they are now approaching.
Thank you so much. You too.